Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be discussing how Brexiteers may be breathing a sigh of relief in a few months as it becomes apparent that they will no longer be the group to have caused more economic damage to their own country than anyone else in the modern world. The arse is about to fall out of the Russian economy. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I've said before that, for a superpower, Russia doesn't actually have a large economy. It's significantly smaller than our own. We have already seen the damage that we have done to our economy with Brexit by raising trade barriers with our most important market, when it is usual for countries to negotiate lower trade barriers with important markets. And when I say usual, I mean exclusively the case. I also said a while back that we must be the first country to impose such trade sanctions on ourselves in peacetime. The same is still true, but Russia has just been surrounded by trade barriers that will make our Brexit folly look like a minor inconvenience. Now, I'm no expert on Russian trade and the Russian economy, but I have been paying attention to those who are of late. And we can draw significant parallels between Brexit and Russian sanctions to see what might happen. The first difficulty we found ourselves in with exporting, our problems arose from restrictions on what we could export. So obviously, if there's a certain thing we couldn't now export into the EU, then that collapsed, that business model collapsed. There's the paperwork required for the goods that are permitted to be traded. There's extra costs in the form of fees, duties, increased staffing costs. But we can still make payments, and if we can get our goods onto a lorry, we can still get it to customers in the EU. Russia has found itself in a position where it's struggling to do business at all. We did eventually remove Russian banks from SWIFT. You may have heard of this. This is a system for communicating with banks around the world so that payments can be processed super quickly. Like, you make a payment to a customer, doesn't matter what bank you're using, doesn't matter what bank they're using, instant payment. So removing Russian banks from this system wasn't actually fatal to Russian commerce, because not only do they have their own system, but so do China. And when the other sanctions mean that Russia can't trade with most of the world now anyway, it's actually no big deal if you remove them from a system that helps you trade with most of the rest of the world. So if you're wondering why it was that Boris Johnson, who is clearly avoiding applying sanctions on Russia and Putin's network specifically, and more on that tomorrow, if you're wondering why he was pushing for the removal of Russian banks from SWIFT when other Western powers were less keen, that is it. It came at an economic cost for Western countries, but the damage for Russia on its own, limited. But now that Putin has stepped up his campaign from domination to simply flattening the whole of Ukraine, and we're going to have to get ready for much worse headlines than was the case yesterday, the West has clearly decided that almost complete isolation of Russia as a pariah state is necessary. It's been made increasingly difficult to buy anything from Russia. The real key will be European countries in particular weaning themselves off Russian gas. A massive push towards renewables is obviously the answer here. In fact, one problem cited with a war with Russia, before it kicked off, this would have passed most people by, someone was explaining that, if it did kick off in Europe, it would potentially knacker the global economy, of course, because war does, and major war does, especially when it expands. And it would set back our essential plans for net zero around the world. An ecological disaster as well as a humanitarian one. But if we use this to really push for all but eliminating our need for fossil fuels in general, we may still come out ahead on that score. But as well as exports for Russia, imports are a massive problem. Maybe even a bigger problem, because we've just started to see this with Brexit ourselves, with our customs controls. If you have import barriers, you struggle to get in what you need. That's why we haven't imposed full control measures. The EU, on day one of Brexit, had full customs and standards controls. We didn't in the UK because we can't afford to. And Russia, like the UK, imports a lot. It can still do business with China and a few others. And China, while not condoning Putin's behaviour, may prefer to move closer to Russia than the West on this. Now that may sound odd, may sound a little bit odd, but bear in mind that China wants to become the economic power of the world. Of course it does, all superpowers will aspire to that. It has seen what the world is doing to Russia's economy. Yes, the impact of that may not yet be obvious. You might talk about, the stock market crash, the ruple's not worth very much. The full blow is yet to come. Summer will be a very, very bad time for people in Russia. Now, if China chooses to cut off Russia in solidarity with the general global feeling, and certainly that of the other major powers of the world, and align more with the West, that's a possibility. But then they risk putting themselves in the same vulnerable position as Russia is. Like, let's say one day China does something and the West takes major issue with it, this sort of level of issue, and we apply our own sanctions on China. Well, then their economy suffers. Now, I don't know anything of Chinese thinking on this, of course, but I'd be guessing that China would actually use this experience to maybe think it's probably a good idea to avoid a dependence upon Western economic integration in order to avoid having any weakness from Western sanctions. But anyway, Russia. Any modern economy has a lot of foreign operators inside its market. They're there to buy and sell. International trade requires these people. The future prospects for international trade in Russia are massively reduced now. And so many of these operators will leave the country. That puts a huge hole in the supply chain, even when that supply can come from countries not applying major sanctions, because they may still in the future, and sanctions are being applied right now by a lot of countries. A lot has been made of Russia's stockpile of wealth, including a fortune in gold. But who can Putin sell that gold to? China? Yeah. But they will know that Russia is desperate and they won't give a good price for it. So you can look at, Russia's got X amount of billions of gold in reserves. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. Because the value of the Russian reserves you're reading about in reality will be much less, because Russia's government will not be able to extract their full market value in trade. If it wants to use that gold to buy something, China will go, yeah, but we're not going to give you a fair price for it, because we know you're desperate, you see. Russia is also a highly industrialized nation, but it's not self-sufficient in this regard. I was reading a thread from a Russian-based academic who pointed out that they rely on components from around the world. If they can't import these components, and they can't, production will just end. It already has started. Some factories have already started ending their production. And it's the same thing I've been trying to say about the UKCA mark that our Brexit government wants to replace the CE mark with. If we keep them in tandem, all is fine. At the moment, as I said, on British products, you see UKCA and CE. No problem. But if we insist on the UKCA mark over the CE mark, it's like we're not accepting the CE mark, it has to be UKCA, we suddenly lose access to a lot of imported components and basically everything collapses. Not only our factories, because they can't get the components, but even just maintaining things that we have now. Planes, cars, lifts, x-ray machines in hospitals. This is why I don't actually believe we will make that move. We've already delayed it. It was supposed to be in place this year. It's not. And we will again. But Russia isn't losing these components because of some boneheaded Brexit ideology that they can change their mind on. They're doing so as a result of sanctions imposed on them by others. In the parallels between, say, Nazi invasion of Europe and Putin, remember, the Nazis had the means of producing their war machines in-house for a long time. And when they ran out of resources and could not get more, they lost. Putin's war machines have already shown themselves to be knackered. Yes, he still has more than enough hardware to flatten Ukraine, and I grow increasingly fearful that nothing can stop the hell on earth that this madman is inflicting upon them now. But it's all very well talking about these sanctions hitting hard in a few months. What's going to be left of Ukraine by then? But if the view is that there can be no quick victory against Putin here, unless of course his generals say, we need some more targets, Mr. President. We've got the map on the 5th floor. Could you go and pick up some targets for us to attack? Which cities would you like us to take next? Yeah, it's over there by that open window next to Colonel Clumsy. Unless that happens, no quick victory. So all we can do is shore up Ukrainian defences to hold out as long as possible while we wait for the sanctions to bite harder. And this is how it will go. Their sources of imports will be severely limited. Their potential for exports even more so, because even countries who will continue to be happy to do business with them will squeeze Russia for everything they get. And also some of these other countries, even though the governments may say, yes, you can still trade, individual businesses in those countries may need to make sure they don't personally fall foul of sanctions from particularly the United States. Unemployment in Russia will explode out of control. Obvious knock-on effect there, lower tax revenues. Same thing we've seen in this country under the Tories, but on a grander scale. That means Russia can't pay its own staff. Transport's knackered. They rely on imported vehicles, including aircraft I've seen. So obviously, if you import the aircraft, you need to import the parts for it. Can't get the parts for maintenance, then your flight's grounded. I've seen someone saying that growing food will be a major problem. Now, actually, that did surprise me. But they said they import a lot of seeds. Now, yes, as long as you've got the land and you've got the farmers, you can still grow something. I don't know that that would be a devastating problem. But of course, the costs will go up if you have to change what you're growing. The costs will go up. At the same time as incomes are coming down. It's like the cost of living crisis in the UK, but on crack. What Russia is about to go through is an extreme and accelerated Brexit process. There's no way that the frog in that boiling pot will slowly become acclimatised to its new level of heat. But what good will it do? Well, it is very, very harsh on the many innocent Russians who do not want this war on any level. You know, as I say, it's always better to try and apply sanctions to Putin personally than to the Russian people. But that is how this is going to have to go now. But remember that there are those in Russia who support Putin and his actions. There are many innocent ones who do not, but there are plenty who do. Otherwise, he could never have achieved that position. You know, like Brexit supporters in the UK. They've been lied to, but this may expose those lies. They are about to suffer very badly. Not as badly as the Ukrainians that their champion is destroying, but their lives are about to be turned upside down. They are going to lose their jobs, their access to food, medicines, even heating. And what is Putin going to do to lessen the cost of living? What is he going to do as head of government to ease the suffering of his people, to ease this cost of living burden on his people when he needs every ruble for rapidly failing war efforts? Unfortunately, it will also take time for all of this to bite, but it will be months, not years. In the meantime, we're also going to have to continue to see daily atrocities committed that forever destroy lives in Ukraine. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further. Please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.